Hello everyone, this is Michael from Blue Sky Bio. We have added some new features and functionality to our new Blue Sky Monitoring platform. In this tutorial video, I will take you through the process of setting up a patient, creating the timeline, and I will point out the new features and functionality as we go along. If you're not yet familiar with Blue Sky Monitoring, then simply go to BlueSkyMonitoring.com and click on any of the links below to get to the relevant information page. So I'm not going to go through this page in detail, but it's a great way to track your liner patients, exactly the stage that they're up to, and of course receive photos and videos of your patient's teeth. The patient will be prompted, of course, and reminded when to change their liners, when to perform the scan, etc., through a very user-friendly app that they can install on their cell phone. Pricing regarding the app and the features and functionality could all be seen on this page. It's a one-time per patient fee of $29. The first 5 patients are free, so you could get started with the platform pretty much immediately. And regarding the scope, you could go ahead and download the STL files to print the scope. So if you have a 3D printer and it's idle, you could go ahead and print out the scopes yourself. Or you could go ahead and order the scopes online. A single scope is $24, but you could see as the package size increases, the price per scope drops considerably. So again, all the information is BlueSkyMonitoring.com, right underneath the sign-in button. So Blue Sky Monitoring is part of the Blue Sky Bio digital product family, which means that if you have a Lab Pronto account, a Bio Big Box account, a Blue Sky Meet account, an account for any of the Blue Sky Bio digital products, that means you already have an account for Blue Sky Monitoring as well. So you could go ahead and click on sign into Blue Sky Monitoring. You could sign in exactly the same way you sign into any of our other Blue Sky Bio digital products. You could use your email address, your phone number, your Google account, your Apple account, any of the possibilities. So I'm going to sign in using my email account and go ahead and click on next. I'm going to enter the relevant password and go ahead and click on login. Okay, so if this is your first time logging into Blue Sky Monitoring, you're going to see a screen that looks exactly like this. In the future, of course, you'll have the left side of the screen full of your patient's names, exactly where they stand in terms of their treatment. Everything will be color-coded, so if there's a step that's overdue, if your patient hasn't sent in what they're supposed to send in, then you're going to have a red frame around it. If it's pending your review, then you'll have a blue frame around it. And if everything is up to date, you'll have a green frame around it. Anyway, to add a patient and get started, you simply click Add Patient. And then we're taken through a 3-step process to set up the patient. It's a very quick process. The first one is actually putting in the patient's information. The second one is creating the treatment, which means just giving the treatment a name and entering the number of aligners and the ability to actually upload the STL files from the digital treatment plan. And then we have the ability to request scans. So the first 1 or 2 times that you do this, it might take you a couple of minutes, and then afterwards it will be even faster than that. So I'm going to go ahead and enter a fictitious patient information here. Okay, so I've put in the patient's details, and while I made up the first and last name, it is important to enter accurate email and phone number information. So I've put in my own details here. And the reason it's important is because the patient is going to be receiving notifications and reminders about when to switch their aligners and, of course, when to perform the relevant scans. So they're going to get those notifications via email and or cell phone notifications. So make sure to confirm and enter the correct email and phone number for the patient. Once you've done that, click Next, and we've completed that first stage. The second stage that we have is to create the treatment. And whenever possible, what we do is we pre-populate the information by default, and you can go ahead and make any modifications necessary. So the treatment name, we just pre-populate with the patient's name plus the liner treatment. And if you want to edit that, you can go ahead and edit that. The category, of course, is orthodontics. The product is aligners. And the start date is set for today's date, although, of course, you could modify that as well. Treatment description is just any free text field. You could go ahead and put that in. Now, what we've done and what we've added recently is the ability for an immediate trial patient education scan. So what we'll see in a second is that the patient is prompted to perform a scan in relation to their liner change date, X days before or X days after or on the liner change date itself. But what we've done here is we've put in this checkbox so that the first time the patient will be prompted to do a scan, if this checkbox is checked, is immediately. So it's a great idea to run through the process for the first time with the patient in your office, in your clinic, so that they can understand the process and they'll have a super simple time to do it remotely. So it's a good idea to keep this checkbox checked. Simply enter the number of aligner sets based on the digital treatment plan, select the change frequency, and then go ahead and upload the relevant digital models. Now, of course, we recommend the use of the BlueSky Plan software in order to do your aligner digital tooth setup, and that's really the simplest workflow, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. BlueSkyMonitoring is an open system, and if you did use another software, you could take the models from that software and upload them at a later stage, not right now, at a later stage. When you're viewing the side-by-side comparison between the scans from the patient and the actual digital plan, you'll be able to upload the models at that point. If you're using BlueSky Plan, and of course you've exported the files, then you could go ahead and select the relevant files at this point of time. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus. I've navigated to the location of the relevant files on my computer. I'm selecting those files and go ahead and clicking on open. We have an option to export the files from the BlueSky Plan software directly in the relevant format so that once in the 3D viewer, you see the tooth movement and the gingival movement as you should. So we've explained that in a different video. I'll put the link in the description of this video as well. But I've selected the relevant files. I can see the files here. If I need to delete a particular file or all of them, I have those options. And once I have that done, I could go ahead and click on next. Now we're up to the third stage of the process, which is to request scans. And we've pre-populated this as well. It's very simple. We want the scans to be performed in relation to the liner change date. So by default, it's 0 days before the liner change, which means the date of the liner change itself. And what we've added in recently is if you don't want to request a scan every time the patient changes their liners, you could select from the drop-down the frequency of how often they should perform the scan. If it's every liner change, every second, every third, you could go ahead and select that from the drop-down list. Now, in addition, we have a lot of functionality regarding the actual scan type. You could just use the recommended settings, which is to perform a video scan horizontal, which means that the scope is moving from right to left with the mouth closed using the current aligner, and you could add any note here. And then an additional video scan horizontal with the mouth closed with the patient's next aligners. So you could see how that looks in the patient's mouth. The patient, of course, will be prompted while using the app and performing the scan exactly how to move the scope, exactly when to take out their aligners, exactly when to take the next scan. They'll be prompted on a step-by-step basis exactly what to do while performing the scan. So this is the default settings. If you want to make any modifications, just use the drop-down arrow if you want an image as opposed to a video. If you want a vertical up-down movement, mouth open or closed, which aligner you want, all the options exist here. If you want to scan, let's say 2 days before an aligner change and then 2 days after an aligner change, just click the plus and you'll be able to add an additional scan request, and then you'll be able to select the relevant scan types. Now, what's going to happen when I go ahead and click the finish button is the system is going to create a timeline of exactly when the patient should be changing their liners, when they should be performing the scans, and of course, everybody will be prompted accordingly. If you don't want that timeline created, just click skip and create treatment, and then you can manually request a scan whenever you want. So that's what this button, skip and create treatment, is doing here, is to skip the creation of the timeline and just finish the process and create the treatment. Otherwise, go ahead and click on finish, which is recommended. And what we see is that on the left side of the screen, we have the patient that we just created with the status of the progress. On mouse over, we have the information regarding exactly what step it's up to, the frequency, when the next aligner changes. The next scan's in 0 days because we requested that clinical education scan. And of course, this has a green frame around it because everything's up to date and it's marked as free, as this is one of the first 5 patients in this account. So the first 5 patients are free. On the right side of the screen, we have on top the treatment information that we've created. And of course, it tracks the progress and exactly what the patient's up to. And then on the right side, we have the timeline of exactly when the liner should be changed and when the scans are requested. And of course, the patient gets prompted automatically and you get the relevant notifications as well. So the timeline that we're seeing right now includes both the scans and the liner changes. If you just want to see the scan request, for example, you could go ahead and filter that out. And of course, we have a messaging functionality that's included that you could communicate with the patient as well. On the top of the screen, we have the file upload, so you should just let that run. Don't close the browser until all the files have been uploaded successfully. And of course, once the patient submits a scan, then you'll be able to have the side-by-side comparison between the scan that came in from the patient to the actual digital model for the relevant aligner step. So you could compare side by side the patient's actual teeth with the plan as well.